Hello, and welcome to Modern Miracles. My name is Tess, and this is episode 9. Today, we're going to be talking about Our Lady of Guadalupe. I'm sure most of you have heard of Our Lady of Guadalupe, but I felt like this is definitely something I need to cover because there's a lot about it that I didn't know. Um, it's probably the most famous apparition in the world, and a lot of people, when looking at it, like I first did, see a painting, it's not, it doesn't look on the surface to be anything miraculous, but the story and the evidence goes much deeper than that. So our story starts in the newly conquered Mexico in the 1530s. There was, at the time, the Aztec Empire had just been defeated by the Spanish conquistadors, and it was a very rough time for both sides in this area. On one side you had the Aztecs, who had been raised in their native culture to believe in multiple gods, who needed blood sacrifice to be appeased, and that was a huge part of their culture. Honestly, it was horrifying. Yeah, I mean, some of the things they did were awful. It was essentially a tyranny, um, to these gods. And then on the other side, you had the Spanish conquistadors who were raised in Europe. They believed in the Christian God. And coming to this land, they saw these people doing these things and they were rightfully horrified. But this led them to treat them less than fairly. They didn't see them as full people, really. So there were abuses on that front. And into all of this, we have the Catholic Church coming and trying to convert the native populations. So, our main character is an indigenous man named Juan Diego. He was living in modern day Mexico City at the time, and the year is 1531. Juan was a recent convert to Christianity, but he was born an Aztec. He knew the native language, he knew the native customs, and all of that. So one day he's walking up this hill in Mexico City and he sees the apparition of this young woman. She appears to be a mixed race of the native and Spanish, which at the time, this was considered the lowest of the low as far as class in the area. The word is mestiza, that's what they called them. And so she appears to him in this form. She's wearing a teal colored mantle and with stars on it. And she introduces herself to him as the Virgin Mary, the Mother of God. And she asks Juan to go to the bishop and ask him to build a temple on this hill to her so that she can be a mother to the entire population. So Juan is like, oh, okay, sure. So on that same day, Juan goes and he speaks to the Archbishop of the area, Archbishop of Mexico. And now the Archbishop, he has a lot going on. And he doesn't really take this seriously at first because I mean, you have to have skepticism. You can't just believe everything that someone comes to you and says they saw. So he's like, no. So Juan goes back to the hill, sees Mary again, and she encourages him basically, um, and tells him to go ask the bishop again. Now, at this point, Juan is like, I'm just a poor farmer. I'm indigenous. I don't, who am I to present this, to start this thing? And Mary encourages him and says, no, I chose you specifically. So She tells him to go see the bishop again, and the next day he goes. And the bishop is like, I don't know if I should trust this guy, but he says to Juan, if you have really seen Mary, ask her for a sign. So the same day, Juan goes back to the hill and he tells Mary what the bishop said and asks for a sign. So Mary tells Juan to come back the next day and she will give him a sign. Now, at this point, Juan goes home and he learns that his uncle is very sick and he needs to take care of him. And he's thinking the next day, I don't have time to deal with this Mary person and all of this and go to the bishop. So I'm just going to take care of my uncle. And he is getting to the point where he thinks I need to find a priest to give last rites. So he leaves his home, goes out to find a priest. And normally he would walk over this same hill that he's been seeing Mary at. But this time, because he doesn't want to deal with that, he skirts around the hill. But Mary finds him anyway. And Mary tells him, essentially, don't worry about your uncle. I'm going to heal him. But right now, I want you to go get this sign. And she instructs him to go to the top of the hill and collect these flowers in his tilma, which is the garment he's wearing. It's like a poncho type thing. So now, first of all, this is happening in December. There shouldn't be any flowers at all. But when Juan goes to the top of the hill, it's frosty, it's cold, it's December. Not only is there tons of flowers, but they're a bizarre flower he's never seen before. It's not native to Mexico. He's never seen it before. So he collects all these flowers and goes back to Mary, and she arranges them in his tilma, and she tells him, take this to the bishop and show him the flowers. So he does that. When he goes to see the bishop, he says that this is the sign that Our Lady gave us, and he drops his tilma, his cloak, and the roses, their roses, spill out, and on his cloak is imprinted this image of Our Lady, just as she had appeared to Juan. Now, of course, the bishop believed him after that. One thing I want to point out, the flowers are called Castilian roses. They are not indigenous to Mexico or North America, but the bishop recognized them because they're native to Europe. So that's number one. Number two, obviously the image, we don't know how that happened. Neither did the bishop. But he did as Our Lady instructed, and he did build a church there. And this tilma is what we know as the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe today. So that's the story. Now I want to get into some of the evidence and science that has gone into looking at this. First of all, a tilma is made of agave fibers. That's, the same thing we get tequila from. It's a cactus, type of cactus. Now, usually this fabric made from these fibers decomposes after 30 years tops. But this one is still, you can still go see it today. And just for the record, this happened 500 years ago. It's not a recent thing. Um, the first 115 years, it was kept outside without a glass covering or protection or frame or anything like that, exposed to dirt and rain and wind and the elements. So that alone is shocking. In 1921, a communist terrorist tried to bomb the tilma. He snuck in 20 sticks of dynamite the same thing we use to blow holes in mountains, by the way. Um, and the dynamite went off. It destroyed the marble altar that was underneath the tilma. It shattered the windows in the church and also nearby buildings, and it bent a solid brass crucifix, like a large one, like floor one, completely backward. But the tilma and the case it is kept in was completely undamaged. In the 1900s, Dr. Richard Kuhn, a Nobel Prize winner for chemistry, analyzed the tilma and could not identify any pigment, any paint, brushstrokes, or layers. So when a painting is made, generally there is a layer of a sketch, essentially, or an underpainting, which then on top of that is applied layers of paint. And this is consistent with pretty much any art form, other than maybe digital printing. There's layers, right? And he assumed, looking at this, that there would be layers of paint. And you can do this with other paintings, like they've done it with famous paintings where they analyze and they see the layers of paint, or they can do x-rays and see the underpainting. There was none of that. There's no brush strokes, no pigment, no paint, nothing is applied onto it. This is a part of the fabric, or it was all applied at once. It was like one stamp, essentially, with multiple different colors. They, they didn't have this technology at the time. Let me just say that. If this technology exists today, if they didn't have it at the time, and certainly a poor farmer, a poor Indian farmer, did not have access to it. So that's one. Dr. Philip Callahan, a NASA scientist and University of Florida professor, studied the tilma with infrared rays and also concluded that there were no brushstrokes and it had never been treated with any preservative for to preserve the fabric. It's also iridescent. So just like you would see on a bird's wings, how, a crow sometimes can look blue or green or purple or black, um, the image is like that. So it looks a different color in certain areas when you're standing at different places. Again, don't know how they did that. So what's fascinating about this is that the tilma itself, if you stand close to it, it looks like a white woman. It looks like a Spanish woman. If you stand farther away from it, it looks to have olive skin, like a native of the area. Here's another wild, fascinating thing. The eyes are a big deal with this. Um, Over 20 ophthalmologists have studied this, some of them atheists. And looking through an ophthalmoscope, which is the thing we've all seen eye doctors use to analyze your eye, they were all in agreement and able to see that this eye microscopically looks exactly the same a human eye would, like a spherical human eye. One of these uh, ophthalmologists, even looking through the microscope at it, or the scope at it, jerked back because he said the eye was looking back at him. Now, they've been able to show in their studies that these eyes are reflecting images just as your eye does. So when light comes into your eyeball, there's a reflection that happens, and there's two that are right side up and one that is upside down. And this allows us to see. Those images, if you look through a microscope, you can see them in a real eye. And you can also see them in Our Lady of Guadalupe's eyes. They've identified 13 different figures who would have been there when this image was taken, essentially, including the bishop and Juan Diego, and a family, an unknown family. The figures in her eyes are in both of the eyes, and the important part is that these images are not visible to the naked eye. So, were an artist to try and paint them, you couldn't. You can't see them except under a microscope. Now, if that wasn't incredible enough, the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe itself is almost a puzzle, a visual puzzle that you can read, especially to the Aztecs. So I'm going to quick fire go through those right now. First of all, she's standing in front of the sun and on top of the moon. Now, the Aztec people worshipped the sun god and the moon god. So a young woman standing in front of and on top of them would have shown this person is higher than those gods. Also, you'll notice she has a black tie around her waist, and that would signal to the Aztecs that she is in fact pregnant. The parted hair on her head was a symbol in the Aztec culture that she was a virgin. So, pregnant virgin. The teal color in her mantle represents royalty to the Aztecs. Now, we Westerners and the Spanish at the time would have thought of that as relating to Mary. That's how she's classically shown, is in a blue mantle. Now, here's where it gets really detailed. On her dress, not the blue part, the part underneath that, she is she has a four-petaled flower over her womb. Now, to the Aztecs, this flower specifically meant divinity and the center of the universe. Now, there are a lot more things. For instance, her mantle with the stars. Scientists have used a machine that looks at where the stars were in relation at different times and different years. And the stars on her mantle were the same constellations that would have been in the sky on the day that this image came to be. And what's crazier about that is they're not from the perspective of the earth. They're from the perspective of the sun. Mind blown. Um so this there are more things that are miraculous about this, but I don't want to get into too much into the weeds about it. I will put a link to two different people who have talked about this. One of them is Godsplaining the podcast. They did a talk about this. And then the other one is a video I found that had a lot of information, and I highly encourage you to check that one out. It has a lot of really fascinating further insights. Um, but I do want to say, as the Lord says, you will know them by their fruits. And here is the biggest part of this, the biggest miracle to me. In this highly divided culture at the time, this war-torn area, it was incredibly difficult for conversion to happen. I mean, as you might guess, there's a language barrier, there's a culture barrier, there's all kinds. After this vision appeared to Juan Diego, and after the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe came, there were 8 to 9 million indigenous conversions within 10 years. Within 10 years. That is astronomical. I mean, it is a huge, huge amount in a very short amount of time. And I think that's evidence of a miracle enough. Now, you can go see the Tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe this today. It is still in Mexico City, and it is the most visited pilgrimage site in the world. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you are interested, I highly encourage you to look further into Our Lady of Guadalupe. There are several books about her and other videos and podcasts. It's fascinating. It really is fascinating. And I didn't even cover all of the crazy, crazy things that there are about this. So I encourage you to do that. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye. The basilica where it is kept is the most visited pilgrim, and the basilica where it is kept is the most visited pilgrimage site. The basilica where it is kept is the most visited pilgrimage. The basilica where it